So as you've probably guessed by now, I love comic books and superheroes. But as much fun as they are, as entertaining as the stories can be, and as engaging as the characters can be, it's not a perfect medium. And that's nobody's fault. It is a surprisingly complicated industry. You've got flashy artwork and crisp writing both competing for dominance. For decades, publishers have been debating whether they should be creating content that's geared more towards adults or towards children. On top of that, you have underrepresentation of women and people of color, both in terms of creators and of characters, which severely limits their potential market. Popular comic books that have been around for a long time have had multiple writers and artists, sometimes within the space of a single year, and each brings their own styles and sensibilities to the book, which then leads to lapses in continuity and internal logic. And on top of all that, most of the more popular titles that are still around have been around since the 1930s, 40s, 50s, or 60s, and the storytelling of those eras was, frankly, a lot simpler, much less sophisticated, with much less reliance and emphasis on coherence or scientific accuracy. So many of the characters, and especially the origin stories from those days, are dated at best and downright embarrassing at worst. And with all that being said, I just wanted to list a few of the things that both irritate and amuse me when I'm reading comic books. Number 1. Now, I am willing to accept that so many people in the DC and Marvel universes are prone to lab accidents, flukes of nature, genetic abnormalities, and etc. The one thing that I have a harder time swallowing is, how does every single superhero and supervillain know how to sew? And not just sew, but create super elaborate costumes that can survive the wear and tear of everyday super life. Now, I get that Peter Parker is a science prodigy. I accept that he created this web fluid that's stronger than steel, and the web shooters that can fire it at high velocity with pinpoint accuracy. But have you ever tried sewing spandex? That is a superpower in its own right. I'd be more likely to believe that he just spun his costume out of spider silk from his own ass. Super strength? Check. Super flexibility? Check. Ability to stick to walls? Check. Spidey sense? Check. Super tailoring skills with stretchy synthetic fabrics? I'm calling bullshit. And what about wear and tear? Okay, yeah, Superman's costume was either a Kryptonian relic that was left to him by his father, or it was made out of his Kryptonian baby blankets, depending on which era of the story you're reading. But either way, it's explained to be super strong. And Batman has unlimited resources, so he can make his bat suits out of the most advanced, fire-resistant, bulletproof, impact-weathering materials known to man. But are we supposed to believe that every C-list backup superhero has access to the sort of advanced materials that can repel laser beams, magical lightning, meteors, the vacuum of space, and everything else that a superhero is going to face on a daily basis? And that every single one of them can either sew it themselves, or they know a seamstress who is not only experienced working with such advanced materials, but will also do the work without giving up a single one of their clients' information for a few quick bucks? And what about schmucks like Calendar Man and Crazy Quilt? These are just everyday jerk-offs who decided to embark on a life of crime on a whim, or an extremely flimsy pretext at best. Now, if they had the kind of money sitting around that was needed to create such elaborate, expensive outfits, then they were probably well enough off that they didn't need to resort to a life of crime in the first place. Number 2. While we're talking about jerk-off villains, why do all of them, even the ones who are explicitly described as being poor hand-to-hand combatants, look like goddamn bodybuilders? Look at Mirror Master. Look at the Calculator. They are ripped. Those are total gym rat physiques. Now, defined muscles do not necessarily mean great strength, and even great strength does not necessarily mean superior fighting ability. But why bother drawing on all those muscles in the first place when those villains just fall harder and faster than Donald Trump's approval ratings? So, okay, it was probably just a bit of artistic license on the part of whoever was drawing the comic book at the time, but wouldn't it actually have been easier to just draw them as the regular schmoes that they were, while also remaining truer to their origin and their personalities? But it's not just supervillains that have some pretty questionable attributes, which leads me to number 3. The absolutely ridiculous way in which non-American superheroes and supervillains are handled in comic books. Why do non-American supers only have names, powers, and costumes that are specific to their country of origin? For starters, at least 90% of the Marvel universe and like 99% of the DC universe are either from, reside in, or operate out of the US. So foreign-born superheroes are kind of a rare breed just to start with. Probably the worst example of this is Shamrock, an Irish superheroine whose name is Molly Fitzgerald and whose power is, I shit you not, the luck of the Irish, which is later explained as her being possessed by the restless spirits of the victims of Ireland's wars, who alter circumstances to give her an advantage in any situation. Naturally, her costume is shades of green and has a large clover on it. Her costume was later altered, but only to show her long mane of red hair, because I guess it just wasn't quite stereotypically Irish enough. And what about Sean Cassidy, aka Banshee, whose power is a sonic scream that just happens to be similar to that of a mythical creature out of Irish folklore? Now, he originally wore the standard blue and yellow X-Men colors, but his costume was later updated to green because, again, subtlety be damned. So, sticking with this example, what I'm asking is, why can't there be like just some generic Irish superhero with a not explicitly Irish name and with regular old non-Irish superpowers like super strength or super speed? And I'm only picking out the Irish heroes because, well, I mean, those are some pretty egregious examples, but also because it's easier for me to talk about the Irish without having to delve into some full-blown racism, which I'm going to do right now anyway. Now, in truth, it has actually gotten a little bit better over time. The current Ms. Marvel is Pakistani-American. There have been African-American and Lebanese-American Green Lanterns. The current Question is not only Hispanic, but also a lesbian. So, yeah, I'm sure you can all point out to a million exceptions, and that's great, but the overall situation is still pretty bad, especially with past established characters. Now, one group that mostly seems to have been spared this sort of ham-fisted treatment is the LGBT community. The DC universe in particular has had some fairly high-profile gay, lesbian, and bisexual characters, like the aforementioned Renee Montoya as the Question, Batwoman, Midnighter and Apollo, and John Constantine. And their sexual orientation did not become the focus of their superhero names, costumes, or powers. It's almost like it was just one aspect of their personality that didn't define everything that they did, like every other human being in existence. So that was nice, that was refreshing to see. Now, as for the Marvel Universe, they have Deadpool, of course, and that's great, because he's a great character, but they've also got Wiccan. What, you've never heard of Wiccan? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. He's a member of the Young Avengers. He has some vaguely defined Deus Ex Machina kind of magical powers, and before taking the name Wiccan, despite not being one of the Norse gods, he used the codename Asgardian. I'm not even going to say anything. Just going to leave that right there. Marvel, you know what you did. So speaking of accountability, let's move on to number 4. Now, I think this is more of a recent phenomenon, and I think it really is more prevalent in the movies than it is with the comic books. But what I want to know is, why do people blame superheroes so much for the collateral damage that is caused during their battles with megalomaniacal and genocidal supervillains. I mean, what are they supposed to do? Just let the supervillains have their way? Now, I kind of get it in Avengers Age of Ultron, because all of the damage was caused by Ultron, who was, albeit inadvertently, created by the Avengers. However, it was never any part of the Avengers' plans for Ultron to raise and then drop a major city, causing millions or billions of casualties. And getting blamed for an alien invasion in the first Avengers movie makes even less sense. They were the only people standing between an entire friggin' army. I mean, seriously, 6 people fought off an entire army while also assisting with evacuation efforts and minimizing casualties, while the government's only solution was, let's nuke Manhattan.
Then fire the missiles!
But somehow the Avengers are the bad guys? That's a raw deal no matter how you look at it. And in Man of Steel, it wasn't just bystanders in the movie who put Superman on blast for all the damage that was caused to Metropolis during his battle with Zod. Huge sections of the audience also seemed to feel that Superman was a little too casual about the collateral damage that he caused, and that therefore he wasn't true to the character. Hello? How did we all forget about the massive Kryptonian world engine that was going to wipe out all human life on Earth, apparently by dropping some super sick bass?
Initiate.
No, Superman, please pull your punches. Because God forbid that a few buildings should fall down in one city while you're busy saving the rest of the world. Now, I think a lot of people need to go back and rewatch that movie. And while they're at it, they should probably go back and rewatch Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
The needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few.
Or the one.
Well said, Captain. Well said. And while we're speaking of captains, let's move on to number 5. Why are there so many superheroes and supervillains whose names start with Captain? Or Doctor, for that matter. See how smooth that segue was? That wasn't forced at all. But my point still stands. There's Captain America, Captain Marvel, the other Captain Marvel, Captain Cold, Captain Atom, Captain Boomerang. The problem is so bad that it actually led to the naming of one of my favorite obscure superheroes, the Captain, from Next Wave.
The Captain! His name is the Captain!
I love this character so much that I actually cosplayed him once. Exactly one person at the whole convention actually got the reference, but I'm still considering that a success. But I digress. Now, the whole point behind this character's name is that he was supposed to be a satire of the proliferation of captains in the comic book universes. Now, in-universe, his whole story is that after acquiring superpowers and embarking on a superhero career, he wanted to give himself a name beginning with Captain, but quickly found out that every possible codename beginning with Captain was already being used, and he actually had to pay someone just for the privilege of calling himself the Captain. Now, he did briefly refer to himself as Captain but as soon as Captain America heard about that, Captain America beat the crap out of him and left him in a dumpster with bar soap in his mouth.
Language!
But I'm digressing again. The point is, there are way too many characters who call themselves Captain. There are a few who use Major or Commander, even fewer who might use General or Sergeant. I've never heard of anyone calling themselves Lieutenant or Petty Officer or Specialist. Yeah, oh well. Now, Doctor is another overused term. They're the heavy hitters, of course, but there are also a slew of B and C listers like Dr. Light, Dr. Midnight, Dr. Phosphorus, even Dr. Psycho. And yeah, I mean, Doctor Strange was already a legitimate doctor before becoming a superhero. Dr. Fate had some half-assed storyline way back in the Golden Age, where he went to medical school for like a week, although he was already calling himself Dr. Fate before that. Douche. Dr. Octopus and Dr. Doom and Dr. Manhattan all have PhDs in various fields. So I guess most of the Doctor codenames are used by bona fide doctors, unlike all of the self-appointed captains. But still, that's awfully conceited, don't you think? You've already got superpowers, or, I don't know, death rays, or armies of minions, or whatever. Do you also really need to ram your higher education down our throats while you're at it? Just dial it down a notch, Dr. Dickhead. Okay, wow, that went way longer than I expected. I always think these videos are going to be like 3 minutes long, but by the time I finish ranting and adding all of my stupid little cutaway jokes, I'm up to at least 10 minutes every single time. I promise, I will work on that in the future. But yeah, that's it for now. So hopefully you got a little chuckle out of this. Comment, like, subscribe, share, whatever that whole procedure is.
Come on! Come on!
Till next time, true believers.